So as many of you guys know, the debates were taking place this past Tuesday. I covered it. It was a really interesting debate, very long, 3-hour debate, and I'm going to kind of delve into a couple of the parts that stood out to me the most. So the first kind of back and forth that took place, or at least that I noticed that took place, was the one that took place between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So, of course, Bernie Sanders, as you guys know, stands for Medicare-For-All. He has a position on Medicare-For-All that is long withstanding. It's not something he's strayed away from, while a lot of other candidates have. And then there are candidates like Joe Biden and Amy Klobuchar and others who are in favor of a centrist public option type position, or just kind of improving on Obamacare. So that's something that Joe Biden is strongly in favor of. And he's taken on Bernie Sanders multiple times on this matter. So I'm going to play you guys this exchange that Biden and Bernie have, and then we'll analyze it on the other side. Check it out.
As some of you have indicated, the differences between all of you on this stage are tiny compared to the differences between you and President Trump. There are, however, fundamental differences between many of you on this stage. Vice President Biden, just on either side of you, Senator Warren is calling for big structural change. Senator Sanders is calling for a political revolution. Will their visions attract the kind of voters that the Democrats need to beat Donald Trump?
Well, I think their vision is attracting a lot of people. And I think a lot of what they had to say is really important. But, Senator Warren said we can't be running any vague campaigns. We got to level with people. We've got to level with people and tell them exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to get it done, and if you can get it done. I'm going to say something that is probably going to offend some people here, but I'm the only one on the stage who's gotten anything really big done, from the Violence Against Women Act to making sure that we passed the Affordable Care Act, to be in a position where we, in fact, took almost a $90 billion act that kept us from going into a depression, putting us in a position where I was able to end able to end the issue of gun sales in terms of assault weapons. And so the question is, who is best prepared? We all have good ideas. The question is, who's going to be able to get it done? How can you get it done? And I'm not suggesting they can't, but I'm suggesting that that's what we should look at. And part of that requires you not being vague. Tell people what it's going to cost, how you're going to do it, and why you're going to do it. That's the way to get it done. Presidents are supposed to be able to persuade.
Just to clarify, Vice President, who are you saying is being vague?
Well, the senator said she's being vague on the issue of, actually both of them being vague on the issue of Medicare-For-All. No, look, here's the deal. It costs $30 trillion. Guess what? That's over $3 trillion a year. It's part of the entire federal budget. Let me finish, okay?
You'll both get in.
If you eliminated the entire Pentagon, every single thing, plane, ship, troop, the buildings, everything, satellites, it would pay for a total of 4 months. 4 months. Where do you get the rest? Where does it come from?
Two things.
Senator Sanders, respond.
In two ways. Joe, you talked about working with Republicans and getting things done. But you know what you also got done, and I say this as a good friend. You got the disastrous war in Iraq done. You got a bankruptcy bill which is hurting middle-class families all over this country. You got trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China done, which have cost us 4 million jobs. And let's get to Medicare-For-All. Let's be honest. We spend twice as much per person as do the people of any other major country on earth. And the answer is, if we have the guts, and I would like to see the Democratic Party have that guts, to stand up to the drug companies and the insurance companies and tell them that the function of health care is to guarantee care to all people, not to make $100 billion in profit. If we stood together, we could create the greatest health care system
Vice President Biden, you
in
can
the world.
respond, and then Senator Warren.
We can do that without Medicare-For-All. We can do that by adding a public option. We can.
No,
and we can afford to do it.
You got to take on the greed and the profiteering of the healthcare industry.
Let him respond. Vice President.
the greed and profiteering of those insurance companies. They are as much against my bill as they are anybody else. They were strongly against Obamacare. They know it costs them, and it's going to take away the right of people to choose, the 160 million people out there who've negotiated their health insurance, and they want to keep it. They should have a right to keep it.
So, I mean, that was a very long exchange between Biden and Bernie over there, and I mean, it's so obvious that Biden has zero ability to make like a decent argument. Every argument he is making is just pushing the same tired talking points we've been hearing from centrist Democrats and establishment Democrats, and really honestly just kind of your typical pro-Obama Democrats, which are establishment Democrats, but like kind of just those typical people that, you know, just don't want anything to change, but like they also like think they're like progressive, liberal in, you know, quotes, obviously not really that. They're not really that. They just claim they are or think they are, but they're not. But anyway, so first, Joe Biden claims that he's the only candidate on the debate stage that's actually gotten anything, quote, done. And then he listed a bunch of amendments and bills that he passed in the Senate, like the Violence Against Women's Act and all that stuff. Now, okay, that's fine. I mean, when it comes to most politicians out there, I'm sure you can find some good things that they did, and maybe not most, but like the good chunk of politicians, you can look out there, you know, you can look at their record and be like, yeah, okay, that's not a terrible record. That's a decent record. Just looking at the good things, right? Obviously, if you throw in the bad things, there's a lot of bad politicians out there right now, especially. But you know, he lists all these things, but then look how Bernie shoots back, and he says, "Well, you got the disastrous, you know, Iraq war done, quote. The bankruptcy bill done, quote. You know, the trade deals done." So it's like Bernie knows that Joe Biden is just blowing smoke up his own ass and just sniffing his own farts, because he loves the fact that he's, you know, been in the Senate for, I don't know how long enough, 40, or was in the Senate for, I think it was 40 years or something. Like, to Biden, he thinks that, like, oh, going and working with, you know, other Republicans is such a wonderful thing. When in reality, you have to look at the actual policies. So what policies did Joe Biden or any, you know, politician out there, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you could talk all the time about how, oh, I've gotten this done, I've gotten that done. But what is the quality of the legislation that you got done, the quality of the policy or the bills that you got passed? Is it something bad like a war, or is it something good like, you know, expanding some sort of like social program that a lot of people need, you know? And Joe Biden, his record, honestly, in that regard, is totally mixed, but it's so mixed with like neoliberal centrist, you know, centristy type, you know, kind of like capitulation, that everything is just so watered down. Nothing is actually like a progressive reform, because Joe Biden isn't a progressive. He might as well like be a Republican. He might as well just be a member of the GOP when he's with the policies that he passes and the, you know, talking points that he pushes. So yeah, so his you know, bragging about his wonderful accomplishments doesn't really boil down to anything significant, at least in a good way. And you can see that just by looking at the facts. Now, so Bernie, he also addresses the Medicare-For-All point by mentioning how we spend twice as much per person as any other industrialized nation on healthcare, which means we need to take on the corrupt and greedy insurance companies. So obviously, Bernie Sanders is absolutely 100% right on that one. And that's something that Joe Biden listens to, and he's like, oh, who cares? I don't care about that. I don't care about the fact that we spend twice as much per person as any industrialized nation. In his mind, he's just doing the bidding of the multinational corporations and the, you know, big healthcare companies. That's all he really cares about. So when that's all you care about, you don't actually want to do any kind of serious reform, progressive change. You just want to do little changes around the edges, you know, coloring, you know, outside the lines just a little bit. You don't want to go too overboard, because you're going to piss off your corporate, essentially your corporate overlords and the puppet masters out there who expect you to fall in line and do what they demand. So Bernie Sanders is the only one who's not willing to take that kind of stance, or willing to go, you know, do the bidding of those multinational corporations and big healthcare companies. And then finally, Biden says we can do whatever he's pushing for, essentially a public option, Obamacare expansion, whatever. We can do that without Medicare for all, and claims that the health insurance industry is just as much against Biden's healthcare plan, which is basically Obamacare, as they are against Bernie's Medicare for all plan, stating that the 160 million people who will supposedly lose their insurance should have a choice to keep it. So again, just to address quickly, the 160 million people will lose their insurance. That's bullshit. That's a fear-mongering talking point. That's something that a lot of these corporate Democrats and centrists, neoliberal corporatists, they put out there to try and scare people into thinking that they're going to lose their insurance if they get Medicare for all. Now, in reality, it's the complete opposite, because when you get Medicare for all, you just get a better healthcare system. So it's not a matter of losing anything. If anything, you're just losing the possibility of getting screwed over by your insurance companies, which people are suffering with all the time, and getting premiums and copays and deductibles that are just up the wazoo and just fucking them over. And and talking about the whole choice thing is just ridiculous, because you're just basically saying, oh, the choice of getting screwed over by those big insurance companies and big pharma. Yeah, we don't want that. That's not something regular people want. So Joe Biden talking about it like that, as Pete Buttigieg have done, and Amy Klobuchar has done, all these people, they're just they're just pushing out their ridiculously vapid talking points that they can't, that doesn't actually register with regular people. And then when it comes to when he claims that the insurance industry is just as much against Biden, so Biden says the insurance industry is just as much against his plan as they are against Bernie's plan, is complete bullshit. That is not based on any poll, study, nothing. Now, yes, of course they're going to be against Biden's plan to the extent that they don't want any kind of reform. They don't want any kind of thing that's going to take away the power of those insurance companies. But that doesn't mean they're more or just as scared as they are of that as they are of Medicare for all, which is a total, complete, not even reform. It's a complete just taking down of the insurance industry, which is a greedy, for-profit, rapacious, middleman that's screwing people over. Medicare for all completely abolishes those, because it keeps those companies away from basically ripping people off more than they already are. And so for Biden to claim that his healthcare plan is something that they're just as scared of as Medicare for all is absurd, and he's just pulling it out of his ass because he can't think of anything else to say. And if you could hear it, you could hear Bernie Sanders, kind of laughing and chuckling at that, because he knows that Biden's just making that up. He can't come up with anything better, so he has to just make some shit up and say, oh yeah, they're just as scared of my plan as they are of yours. It's ridiculous. So after the debate, so this was during the debate, obviously. After the debate, Joe Biden actually took some really ridiculous cheap shots at Bernie Sanders, and there was an article from Common Dreams, written by Jake Johnson, who's a great progressive reporter, and he wrote this article, and the title of the article is for supporting Medicare for all, Biden accuses Sanders and Warren of, quote, playing Trump's game and trying to con the American people. And the subheadline says, Biden's attack comes as he is falling in the polls and being heavily outraised by his more progressive to the 2020 rivals, which he is by Bernie Sanders, who made, I think, $25.6 million, and Warren made $24.7 million, I think, from donors. Let's see. So let me just read this article, and have an audio clip for you guys here, and then check that out. So the article starts off by saying, speaking to reporters during a campaign event in Ohio on Wednesday, former Vice President Joe Biden accused Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, his top two rivals for the for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, of, quote, playing Trump's game and trying to con the American people by supporting Medicare for all. And then it says, I mean, look, I don't want to pick on Elizabeth Warren, but this is ridiculous, Biden said. The idea that someone is going to be able to go out and spend what turns out to be, if you add on everything that's going to be free beyond Obamacare, beyond Medicare for all, which is going to come out to $3.4 trillion a year. I think that's from the debate. the clip we just played, or maybe he just repeated that in another interview. It seems to be sounds like the same thing. But anyway, it says Biden went on to falsely claim that the $3.4 trillion estimate, for which he did not provide a source, is quote bigger than the entire federal budget. Yeah, that doesn't sound accurate at all. It sounds like he just once again pulled it out of his ass. And it says the former vice president neglected to mention that the United States spent $3.65 trillion on healthcare in 2018, a number that is expected to rise rapidly over the next decade under the for-profit system Biden's public option plan would leave intact. It says Biden also took aim at Sanders, falsely stating that the senator and author of the 100-page Senate Medicare-For-All Act of 2019 hasn't explained how he would finance Medicare-For-All. So we're going to get to that in a second. So before that, let's play this clip of Joe Biden's, a short clip of him commenting on Bernie Sanders and his Medicare-For-All plan. So check this out, and then we'll discuss it on the other side.
I was glad to see him. I really mean it. But Bernie doesn't play for half his plan. He's talking about, 7% on a FICA tax out of your paycheck, another 4%. It doesn't even get you there. And we have to, look, the last thing the Democrats should be doing is playing Trump's game and trying to con the American people to think this is easy. There's nothing easy about it. If you're going to do it, tell us how you're going to do it. It's called truth in speaking. That's all it is. And if you notice, by the way, as I said before, I was really pleased. If you notice, they're all talking about the Biden plan without saying the Biden plan.
So, nobody is advocating for the Biden plan. I mean, nobody is going out there and saying, yeah, Joe Biden's plan is totally wonderful. Now, yes, there are candidates, obviously, that are saying, I support a public option, and I support, Pete Buttigieg talking about Medicare for all who want it, which is basically just a public option, but you just rename it Medicare for all who want it, and then you say, I want a public option, if you want to keep it or whatever, if you want it, whatever. So, that's just a bunch of bullshit. And then talking about how Bernie doesn't explain how he's going to pay for it, and he's not going to do this, and the amount that he says he's going to pay for it is not going to cover it up, blah 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 blah. So it's just a bunch of talking points that he was told by his advisors, and like the article said, he didn't even cite where he got the figure that, we're supposedly paying this much amount of money for healthcare, and then this is not going to, this costs the entirety of the federal budget, but whatever he said. And it's just a bunch of, it's a bunch of talking points that his consultants and advisors feed to him and expect him to, just spit out there and just, make some sort of bullshit case about, for the health insurance industry so that, he's obviously doing their bidding as usual. And then let me read the rest of the article here. It says, as the New York Times reported Wednesday, Biden is under particular pressure because Ms. Warren has passed him in some national and early state polls and joined him as a front-runner, a status he held alone for months. In response to Biden's attack, Warren's communications director, Kristen Orthman, told The Times that instead of speaking to wealthy donors, our campaign has spent the day calling and thanking over 1,000 of our grassroots supporters. Other than that, we have no comment. So, that's basically no comment, but adding that part about how they spent that time thanking our thousands of our grassroots supporters, that's just a play on, like, pretending as if Elizabeth Warren's entire campaign is totally grassroots, and it's like not funded as if it's not funded at all and doesn't involve at all any kind of like big donors, when in reality, as we have covered, Elizabeth Warren is plenty in the pocket of big donors. Not only is she doing fundraisers for the Democratic Party, where they go and charge out thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars per plate, for people to come to a, fundraiser, to an event, and then, just sucking up to a bunch of, rich assholes, basically. And, but not only that, So not only doing those fundraisers, but then she also has a guy named Paul Eggerman, who was dubbed the Pac-Man or something, or personal Pac-Man, or Big Pac-Man or something like that. But basically, like, he was given this nickname because he was constantly contributing to a bunch of super PACs, to a bunch of Democratic super PACs, like I think a couple of like David Brock's organizations and stuff. I think Bridge, not 21st century, that's something else. Bridge to something, and I don't know, a bunch of these stupid Democratic groups with lame, stupid names. So he was, contributing a bunch of those, and then to a bunch of like Obama's PACs as well when he was president. So pro-Obama PACs, and but that guy though, that Paul Eggerman guy, who they call the Pac-Man, he's the current campaign finance chairman for Elizabeth Warren's campaign. So the campaign finance chairman, he handles all the different kind of all the finances, all the donations that are brought in. He handles that shit. So basically, he's obviously spending a lot of his time, dealing with this stuff and taking part in directly in her campaign. And he's probably telling her, yeah, it's perfectly wonderful to take all this money from big donors, expensive donors, and obviously you're going to do their bidding because that's how it works. And then recently, Elizabeth Warren, she decried not decried, but she said she's not going to take the general election money in from like big donors. So she's not going to take corporate donors in the general election. When in reality, when initially she said that, I'm not against unilateral disarmament, but then all of a sudden she decided to change because she got a bunch of political pressure. And by the way, she was going to take that money. She wasn't going to take that money in the primary, and then she said, no, I don't believe in unilateral disarmament, so I'm not going to I'm not going to refused to take it in the general election because we got to beat Trump and blah blah blah. So she was showing herself to be very opportunistic, and she admitted this in multiple interviews. One was on MSNBC, and another one was on the Young Turks with Cenk Uygur. And I've covered this multiple times on the podcast where she said that. And so she was being very opportunistic. Now she changed because she got political pressure. And there's been past times where she's done things, and then she got political pressure, and then she changed her mind. So this is not a kind of a one-off thing for Elizabeth Warren. So that's like it's really sneaky for her, campaign people, or, very convenient for campaign people to talk about how, we just spent our time, thanking our grassroots supporters. But then why don't you go and, why don't you also go and thank Paul Eggerman, who's the campaign finance chair, the head of your campaign finance, campaign finance system, essentially your campaign finance apparatus. He's running that whole fucking thing. Why don't you go thank him too, while you're thanking a bunch of, small dollar donors that gave you money. In reality, it's Bernie Sanders who's getting the money from the small dollar donors. He's not taking money from corporations. And he's getting money from teachers and construction workers and stuff, Walmart workers, Amazon workers. Those are the people that are donating to Bernie because those are the people that believe in him. And then let's see, it continues on here and says Biden's remarks in Ohio on Wednesday came just hours after he joined South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg in launching a slew of misleading attacks on Medicare-For-All during Tuesday night's Democratic presidential debate. For people making $50,000 to $70,000 a year, their taxes are going to go up about $5,000 because the fact is they will pay more in new taxes, Biden said of Medicare-For-All, a statement that earned him a mostly false score from PolitiFact. By the way, PolitiFact is a super centrist establishment type organization themselves, where they do this fact checking and then they're always giving every possible little bit of room to not declare something false that the establishment says, and not to declare something true that the progressives say. So they're constantly trying to give a break to the corporate Democrats and stuff. Brianna Joy Gray, Sanders' national press secretary, pushed back on the premise of Biden's attack on Twitter. Quoting her, it says, the average American family pays $20,000 in premiums, and Joe Biden is focused on $5,000 in taxes, said Gray. The math is clear. Americans shouldn't die because they are poor, period. Medicare for all. So, obviously, this attack from Joe Biden, multiple attacks from Joe Biden, launched against Bernie Sanders, obviously warranted a response from Bernie Sanders. And he did just so. Also, in another article from Common Dreams, He responds to Joe Biden and said, the title of the article says, "It is really sad. Sanders rips Biden for deploying insurance industry talking points against Medicare for All." And then let's just quote a couple of paragraphs here from the article. It says, "It is really sad that Joe Biden is using the talking points of the insurance industry to attack Medicare for All," said Sanders. "Joe must know that we currently spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as the people of almost any other major countries, and that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Under Medicare for All, funded in a progressive manner, all Americans will have comprehensive healthcare coverage as a guaranteed human right and with no premiums, co-payments, or out-of-pocket expenses. Ordinary Americans will be spending far less for that care than they currently pay," the Vermont senator added. The statement comes a day after Biden attacked Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren for quote, "playing Trump's game" by supporting Medicare for All. And that's the part where he said the whole con game of Donald Trump, whatever. So yeah, I mean, obviously Bernie Sanders is absolutely correct there, and he calls out Joe Biden on his bullshit, just completely putting out bullshit talking points, not making any goddamn sense, not putting any kind of truth in anything that he's saying, and it's really, it's truly embarrassing to see how desperate these politicians get, because at the end of the day, like whatever statement you make, whether it's in a debate, whether it's an interview, whether it's a conversation somewhere on TV or whatever it is, or even just like a random interview on the street, right? These things are going into the record, are going into in the back of people's minds. We remember what you're saying. So when you're going out there and you're putting out all this bullshit, you're playing into Trump's game and you're playing Trump's con game, like, ooh, how? And then he doesn't base it on anything. He just says, "Oh, well, because you're telling people that you're not going to pay for something." When Bernie Sanders has spoken very, very clearly and very, very, very much in length when there's speech, interview, whatever it is, debate, he's always talked about how he's going to pay for Medicare for All, and that's going to be from raising taxes. Now, if you want to take issue with the fact that Bernie Sanders wants to raise taxes, that's fine. That's your prerogative to disagree with that and say that's not a good idea. But at the end of the day, what does Bernie Sanders say? As he said here, and I covered it, and I've covered it multiple times before too. He says if you're going to pay those higher in taxes, you're going to be paying much, much less in co-payments, deductibles, and premiums, and just general medical bills where they're just charging fucking how much money, thousands and thousands of dollars, completely milking people of their money, of their finances, of their bank accounts, because they have to go and spend money on a cancer treatment, or they have to go and get some sort of life-saving surgery or something, whatever it is. It's Joe Biden is not. He is not an honest character. And this is actually a guy that, remember, this is not something I actually covered for my show. I didn't get around to covering it, but he actually used his deceased son. I forgot what his name was. Beau Biden? Yeah, Beau Biden. So not Hunter Biden, who's currently the son that's in the news about the whole Ukrainian kind of scandal and stuff. But Beau Biden, he died from, I believe it was cancer. And he actually did a ad. He did a political ad using his son's death to say, "Oh, this is why we shouldn't be doing Medicare for All." And now I didn't see the ad. I just heard about how he did that. But he used his son in that ad. And I'm guessing he probably said the same exact things he said here. He says, "Oh yeah, everybody's healthcare is going to be taken away. The people that talk about Medicare for All don't talk about how they're going to pay for it. Blah 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 blah. All the same fucking bullshit you've already heard." So Joe Biden he's a broken record. He's just going to repeat the same shit again and again and again. It's like not a Ferris wheel, but it's like a merry-go-round. Just go around and around and around and around. You're just going to keep saying the same fucking talking points you're getting from your ridiculously clueless bullshitting consultants and advisors who just tell you to toe the party line. And that's all Joe Biden does. And that's the only thing he knows how to do, because that's what he's been doing for his entire career.